I'm thrilled to introduce Miss Hannah Whitten, New York Times bestselling author. Please welcome her with a round of applause. Thanks, guys.
Hi, my name is Allie, Gillies, and I'm an 8th grader here at Prescott South Middle School.
And my name is Nick Sweeney, and I'm also an 8th grader.
Today, I'm honored and excited to be talking to a New York Times best-selling author, Hannah Whitten. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Are you ready for a few questions?
Sure.
Okay. So first, tell us a little about yourself.
I live here in Cookville. I went to Prescott, as previously stated, back whenever it was over next to Tech. I went there for 5th and 6th grade. I graduated from Tech with a bachelor's in English, and now I live here with a kid and a husband and 2 dogs and a cat. Actually, it's 2 cats and a dog. I just got tongue-tied. And I write books.
When did you first discover that you wanted to be a writer?
Writing was always something that I did for fun whenever I was a kid, and I was a really big reader, so reading and writing just kind of went hand in hand for me. But I started out writing Lord of the Rings fan fiction, and then got into writing more original stuff as I got older. So it's always been part of my life, but I didn't start pursuing it as a career until after college.
Will you tell us about the publication process and the company that published your book?
Sure. So once you have a book, there are 2 different paths that you can take for publication. You can either do traditional publication or you can do self-publishing. So traditional publication is the one that you want to go through if you want to like see your book in bookstores, if you want to have a publisher who's like taking care of marketing and stuff. And then self-publishing, you kind of handle all that stuff yourself. So I did traditional publication, and the process for it is long and involved, but it starts with writing a book. And after that, you edit it, you make it as good as you can, and then you do something called querying, where you're trying to find a literary agent. So you want a literary agent because it is their job to then sell your book to publishers, and they like know about contracts and all that stuff, and they make sure that you're getting a good deal. So in order to find your literary agent, you write, like if you go to the library or a bookstore and you read the back of a book, and there's that part that like tells you what the book is about, and you see if it's actually something you want to read. You write something like that for your book, and you send it in an email to a bunch of literary agents, and if you get really lucky, one of them will be like, yeah, this sounds cool, I would like to read it. And then you send them the entire book, and then they read it, and if they're really into it and they can kind of see a place for it in the market and they know how to edit it, then they'll give you an offer of representation. So now you have your agent, you and your agent work on the book, you edit it some more. And then once it's in really good shape, your agent then takes it to editors at publishing houses to see if any of them want to buy it. So there's like 5 big traditional publishers in the US. One of them is Hachette Book Group, and that's the one that I'm in. And within those larger publishers, there are things called imprints, and that is kind of like how the publisher is divided by genre. So every big publisher would have like a fantasy imprint, a mystery imprint, a romance imprint, a bunch of different genres. So my publisher is Orbit Books, which is the fantasy imprint of Hachette.
What do you do if multiple people want to publish your book?
So one of 2 things happens whenever you have multiple people who are wanting to publish the book. So the first is what happened to me, and it's called a preempt. So basically a preempt is when an editor offers you a bunch of money to take it off the table for everybody else. So they'll be like, we'll give you this amount if you won't let anybody else keep looking at this book and you just give it to us. So that's what we did, but if you don't get preempted, then it'll go to auction, which kind of works the same way as any other auction, where basically the publishers try to outbid each other, and whoever makes the highest bid gets the book.
So how important is time management when being an author?
Time management is extremely important when you're an author, mostly because whenever you're first starting out, you're kind of doing multiple things at once. So you're writing a book, but you're also going to school or working a day job. So you've got to be really intentional about your time and about setting up like blocks of time that you're going to work on your book and not slacking off on that. And it's hard to do at first just because the only person that you're answering to is yourself. So it's easy to give yourself the day off, but if you do that too much, you won't finish.
What is your favorite book?
My favorite book changes a lot depending kind of on the mood that I'm in, but most consistently it's Lisey's Story by Stephen King.
So in your opinion, what makes a good story?
I am most drawn to really complex characters in a story. It's something that's really subjective, and so like different people are drawn to different things. But really good characters are the biggest deal for me. So for me, a good story has got characters that I can see myself in, but that I can also see why they're making the decisions that they're making within the story, even if I don't really agree with the decisions.
Who or what are your inspirations?
I have a bunch. So my biggest author inspirations are there's an author named Catherine Valenti that writes a lot of folklore retellings. She works a lot in folklore and fairy tale, and just uses language in really cool ways and does really cool things with her sentence structure. And also Angela Carter, which is kind of more old school, but she wrote a book called The Bloody Chamber that was a collection of feminist fairy tale retellings, which is really kind of the bedrock of what I'm working on. And as far as just things that inspire me, I do a lot of hiking, kind of getting out of your house and going somewhere else and walking around. I've found I'm able to think through things better and come up with better ideas whenever I'm doing that.
So what was the hardest part about becoming a published author?
The hardest parts, the two hardest parts, one is the waiting, just because things take a really long time, publishing moves really slowly. So it's a lot of sending emails and then waiting to get responses to those emails. So that part's hard, but also the fact that there's very little that's within your control outside of the quality of the book that you're writing. So you write the book, you make it as good as you can, but everything that happens after that, as far as whether people really enjoy it, whether people buy it, what kind of marketing you get from your publisher, none of that is really in your control, which is hard to deal with sometimes.
When people chase their dreams, they often go through people saying they can't do it or it's impossible. How did you find the courage to get back to what you loved when people told you you couldn't do it?
Rejection is the one constant in any kind of creative field. So you never really reach a point where people stop telling you no. Rejection is just something that you have to deal with. So if you want to be in a career that is putting yourself and your work out there, you have to get to a point where you know your own self-worth and you know the merit of your work, even if you don't have a bunch of outside validation given to you all the time. So you've got to find confidence in what you do and not let it be shaky.
Do you ever experience writer's block, and if so, how do you navigate through that?
Yeah, I experience writer's block all the time. I think most writers do. And everybody kind of has a different way of navigating through it. For me, if I am blocked on a manuscript and can't really see how to move forward with it, it's usually because I did something wrong earlier in the draft. So I will typically go back to the point where I made a big decision plot-wise, whether I was going to go in this direction or the other direction. And so the direction that I took and I got blocked on, I'll take the opposite direction this time and see if that fixes it. And usually it will.
What books do you recommend for middle schoolers?
My favorite middle grade books, there's one called Ghost Squad by Clarabelle Ortega, which is about a girl that can see ghosts. There's a series, the first book is called Small Spaces by Catherine Arden, and they're all kind of spooky, ghosty books, and all four of them are really good. And then there's another older series called The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander that I actually read whenever I was in middle school, so they're super old. And I know they're in the public library, and they're probably in the school library too.
What was middle school like for you, and what advice could you give middle schoolers today?
Middle school is weird for everyone, I think. It's a very strange in-between time where you're trying to figure out who you are and what you actually like versus what you've kind of been told to like. So my best advice is to kind of find your people, find the people that are going to put as much into a friendship as you are, that are going to reciprocate the energy and the kindness that you give to them, and don't waste your time with people who aren't going to do that. And to really think about your own interest and the things that really matter to you, and to lean into those instead of trying to distance yourself from them or trying to like things that it seems like you're supposed to.
If you could go back to your past self and you were first writing your book, what would you tell her?
To keep going, just keep writing and not quit, even though I was tempted to many times.
So what was the plot of your story?
So with the caveat that my books are written for adults, so like 18 plus audiences. For the Wolf is a very loose retelling of Little Red Riding Hood with some Beauty and the Beast thrown in there. It is about two princesses of a northern kingdom next to some haunted woods. There's some monsters in there. So the first daughter is supposed to be the queen, and anytime a second daughter is born, she gets sacrificed to the wolf in the wood, who's like the guardian of the haunted woods. So Red, who is our main character on her 20th birthday, gets sent to the woods. No one thinks she's ever going to come out. Nobody really knows what's going to happen to her once she gets in there. But she goes and she finds the wolf, and it turns out the wolf is just some guy who really needs her help to keep the monsters contained.
Obviously, getting a book published was one of your biggest dreams, so what's your next big dream?
I try to keep my dreams in categories of like ones that I can control versus ones that I can't. So the one that I can control is to keep writing books and hopefully keep getting them published. The one that I can't control is for Netflix to give me a call and buy my film rights.
So how hard is it to get people interested in your book?
If you go the traditional publishing route, then your publisher has a whole team of people whose job it is to keep people interested in your book. That does all the marketing and spends a lot of time just making sure that they're sending your book out to, so that people who are going to be interested in it are going to get to it. But I've also found, like with my own social media audiences and stuff, that talking about your work the same way that you talk about things that you're a fan of gets other people excited about it. So if you're really into like a movie or a TV show or another book series or whatever, like the same energy that you use to talk about those things, use it to talk about your own work.
Thank you for coming and speaking. We are very grateful and honored that you came. Would you be willing to answer a few questions from the audience?
Sure.
Do you guys have any questions?
I really like the idea of that also, but I do think that you want to have something in your first page that's going to signal to your readers that like, hey, this is something that you're going to like, you're going to want to keep up with this. And like, you don't have to give everything away, but just having a hint of kind of what's to come, I think is important in that first page. First pages are really hard. How do I deal with that? If I have a deadline that's coming up and that's what's stressing me out, and I know that I'm not going to be able to finish what I need to before the deadline comes up, I'll usually email my agent, try to get an extension. But if that's not going to happen, I'll like take an hour and go do something else, go for a drive, listen to music, go get coffee or something, and just kind of give my brain time to relax and then come back at it later whenever I'm not quite as wound up.